He knelt down on the sculpted branch of his mother's tree. Her threads were laid out, waiting for him. He put his first foot forward, tapping the thread 3 times to let her know he had arrived. Pushdot took another step and entered his mother's lair. He walked up through the curved boughs of her home, looking out through the netted windows at the murky water below. He took a long breath in, steeling himself for the berating to come. He touched the cordage at the top of her entrance, tapping his 3 fingers in sequence. "Enter, my son!" she called from the other side of the woven curtain. Pushdot stepped in. He looked at his mother quickly, then bowed his head. His 4 eyes caught Stormski before he pivoted slightly to look at his mother's other side where he saw a tight clasp. "You know why we are all here?" He darkened his eyes. "No, mother. Please excuse my ignorance." She put her 2 pairs of hands together. "I have been talking with my daughters-in-law. They have told me numerous things about you, boy." He looked upon her, head still bowed low. "Tight clasp tells me you have forgotten how to thread a hook as your father taught you. Is that so?" Pushdot darkened his eyes once more. "No, mother. I remember how." She stood up, shouting, "Then why are my grandchildren hungry? Why are my chosen daughters so thin?" She stepped down closer to him. "Stormski thinks you've forgotten how to weave a net as I've taught you. Did you forget my nettings?" He cowered lower. "No, mother. I remember." "Then why are my grandchildren so hungry? Explain to me why my chosen are so thin. Answer me, boy." He focused one of his eyes up at her. "I'm sorry, mother. Please forgive me." Tight Clasp pulled something out of a pouch at her side and lifted it up toward Mother Darkness. The mother saw it with her back eye and took the offered item. She held it over her son's head. She opened the dried skin, revealing woven sheets covered in dots of ink. "Explain this to me, Pushdot. What is this?" He crouched lower, looking up at his towering mother. "Forgive me, mother. I'm sorry. I meant no harm." "What is this?" she said, shaking it over him. "Tell me before we eat you. I just—" "You just what?" He fought to control his shaking, focusing on her. "I kept track of them. They move." She flipped through the silken sheets, looking over the patterns of dots. "Track of what?" "The Everlight bugs." She clicked her teeth, chuckling. "The Everlight bugs do not concern you, male of mine. To waste your time, your thread on something so trivial while your family is hungry. This is a concern." She paired off her eyes, focusing on her daughters-in-law. "Do you ladies think we can mend this?" Pushdot's wives stared at him, motionless. Mother Darkness refocused on her son. "I think we can mend this yet." She threw the leather-bound weaves down in front of him. "How many more of those weaves have you made, boy?" Stormski cleared her mouth before speaking up. "He has a box of them hidden in his nest. Many, many weaves wasted. Daughters, go home. Gather those weaves and stoke the stove with them." She looked back at the 2 younger women. "He will be home with meat by the time you have it heated and ready." The 2 daughters-in-law stood up and stared, descending down past Pushdot. Tight Clasp spat on his back leg as she went by. Mother Darkness stood watching as the 2 walked down the entry and exited the nest, her feet feeling them leave the thread. She immediately knelt down in front of her son. "You idiot boy! You're putting our clan at risk with this nonsense." She took the tome off the ground and hit him across the face with it. He flinched slightly, letting out a whimper. She put one of her hands on his upper shoulder. "You've always lacked focus. Your mind flutters to trivial things, but you have to focus, else they're going to eat you." He stared at her. "Like you did, Dad?" She widened her eyes. "Yes, and your grandmother." He looked at the tome in her hand. "They aren't light bugs." "Of course not, you idiot." He looked up at her. "You know what they are?" She chattered her teeth. "No one knows what they are, but they aren't bugs. They aren't any of the superstitions others have thought up." "How do you know, Mother?" "Because they are beyond us, beyond our world. To think on such things is to invite disaster upon you and your home. Look at what such thoughts have done to you. Think on where you are at sun. You're thinking about the lights in the night sky at the cost of your life. You have to focus." She stood up and pointed out her door. Now hurry and go catch some iguan before your wives eat you. He stood up slowly, careful not to trigger her own primal feasting reaction. She raised a hand, cutting him off. Silence. Do as you're told. He darkened his eyes, turning to exit. Yes, mother, he said, taking a step toward the curtain. She caught his shoulder, causing him to flinch in fear. These things in your mind. You can't stop thinking, can you? He pivoted his back eyes toward her. No, I'm sorry, mother, I try. She turned him back around, holding his shoulders. You're not stupid, and you're not a coward. You knew it would come to this, and still you've risked everything. For the skylights? He widened his eyes. Yes. None of the mothers know anything about what is beyond. We just fear and make up stories about what we don't know. Not you, though. You watch, learn. She stood taller, pulling him straight. I have a task for you, boy. His eyes widened more. Feed your wives tonight. Feed your children. Sate them, and then we will sate your curiosity. How does that sound? That sounds good. He stammered, still fearful of her maw. We mothers do not know what is beyond, but maybe something from the beyond will know. She paused for a moment. You remember the stories of the southern swamp? Why no one builds nests there? The witch beast. She widened her eyes back at him for a moment. None come back whole from those woods, be it limbs or a head. We have sent our stupid and our cowardly to investigate for generations, and still we know nothing of the creature. You want me to go? He asked. You're going to end up dead no matter, given the path you're on. Might as well die attempting to solve one of your beloved riddles. He widened his eyes again. Thank you, mother. I will feed them and do as you ask. She let his shoulders go. Come back soon. Tell me of your adventure. I will sit and talk with your fat wives while you journey. He darkened his eyes, bowing, and exited out of her nest. Pusdot and his 3 sons returned to their family nest in a tall knot tree, each carrying 2 strings laden with wet iguan. The boys set to work filleting the wiggling creatures and putting them in the oven to cook for the women. Pusdot stood across the kitchen, watching as his weaves fueled the feast for his family. There was ample for his 2 wives and 4 girls, but the scraps were just enough to tide the hunger for his sons. He went without eating so his sons could at least have some broth and morsels. He watched as the women went up to their sphere for the evening before sitting down with his sons. He looked at them in turn as the fire died down. My sons. They reached over, taking 3 of his hands. He chattered his teeth at them, joyous. I have taught each of you well. In you have weaves of your grandparents and of me. You fed them today, and you will be able to in the times to come. I do not have long. His eldest, Sliplegs, spoke up. It will be okay, Dad. We fed them. They're happy. It is okay. The younger twins widened their eyes in agreement. Pusdot squeezed his son's hands. No, it will not be okay, not if I don't erase this shame from myself. I have a plan, but I need your help. Will you help me? Each looked up at him, agreeing with their eyes. Good. I will hang nets tonight with what weaves I have left. Retrieve the shetoff from them in the morning. Keep them happy. Feed yourselves. He stood up and walked over to the wall and reached through the bindings. He pulled out a tome the women had missed. He walked back over and sat in the circle. This is my last weaving of pages. Take them apart, make lines, make hooks, catch a multitude, and keep them fed. I have to go on a quest for my mother. The nest will be yours to feed. Do you understand? Sliplegs held his brother's hands. I will feed them, father. The twins widened their eyes. We'll help, Dad. One of them said he couldn't tell either apart. Pusdot reached over and held his sons' heads. Work together. Keep them fed. Don't get eaten. I love each of you. Sliplegs hugged his dad. Where are you going? I have been tasked with finding the Yaga, he said, hugging him back. Pusdot hung the nets in his woods and climbed down into the lower branches as the bright light of day started peeking through the upper branches. He gave a long look through the dark boughs of his territory before darkening his eyes and heading south. He crawled along the trees through the paths around his neighbors' territories, careful not to trip their threads. Little by little, The threads became less and less. Eventually he reached the threadless woods of the south. He felt at ease near the water here. The fanga were rare this far south, and he only let one eye drift to watch the surface for the ambush predators. He kept going along the branches, touching feet down on an outcropping of mud. He searched around, wary of fanga eggs' clutches. There were none. He paused, relaxing next to a solitary tree on the mound. The cries of a flock of shitolf overhead caused his eyes to wander. He watched the massive swarm flutter around, dancing in the sky. One of his eyes caught, noticing something odd in the bough above him. He froze, staring at the oddity hidden in the leaves. It hadn't moved, but rather the shape stood out to him. It was colored appropriately, but it was not a natural shape, especially for this species of tree. Puzdot watched for many moments, waiting, but the thing did not move. He moved slow, almost unmoving, crawling up the trunk of the tree. The thing, object, did not respond. He crawled up onto the bough and moved through the leaves nearer to the thing. He stopped, looking it over. It was rectangular, as was his woven pages, and affixed to the branch with weavings unseen before. The box was curious, but this method of affixing it to the branch held his mind. His hand reached out, touching the black fibers, feeling them, learning the tight-woven technique. Amazing. His fingers pulled at the threads, undoing them gently. He paused, watching the box, still no change. So amazing. He pulled the strap free, letting the box fall. He watched it crash into the soft soil, still no change. A small circle in the center of the box stared up at him. He watched for a moment longer, but one after another his eyes shifted toward the woven strap. The circle on the box watched him as his two upper hands undid the weaves on the strap, while the two lower hands pulled thread from his chest spinnerets, attempting to emulate the weave. Puzdot sat fixated, weaving, while the bright light above moved across the sky. He stopped, his skin tense. A noise came from the water. Two of his eyes started scanning, looking for funga lurking in the murk. He stopped as he saw the creature. It was foreign to him in shape, color, and concept. It lacked the appropriate number of arms, and those it did have were tipped with far too many digits. It stared at him with too few eyes while resting in a floating conveyance. The thing raised an appendage in the air and made noises at him. Puzdot was caught off guard as a sphere floating next to him spoke. "Hello there, friend." Puzdot backed toward the trunk of the tree, clasping it, his eyes scurrying around for an escape. The sphere floated where it was, shifting in the air, tracking his movements. The creature on the water made noises again. The sphere spoke again. "Sorry to freak you out. I didn't mean to startle you. I have no intention of hurting you." Puzdot looked down at the thing on the water, then up at the sphere. He pointed at the floating orb. "This it speaks for you?" The creature moved its head up and down, making noises. The orb spoke again. "Yes, come on down. You hungry?" Puzdot looked down at the creature, and it was pulling Igwin out of a box. He widened his eyes and moved slowly down the tree. "You are the witch of the woods." The creature made loud noises before speaking again. "A damn few of you have called me that. I don't blame them. I quit putting out traps once I realized you fellas weren't some dumb bugs," the orb replied. Puzdot split his vision on the orb and the creature. "Is this a trick? You luring me down? Baiting me, aren't you?" The witch shook its head. No, this bayou is full of food. No need to eat anything like you guys." It waved its hand at him, motioning. "Come on down, you creepy mating act. Share a meal with me." Puzdot paused, slowly moving one foot back up the tree. "Halt! Halt!" the orb said, translating the creature's words. "Come on down. I didn't mean to curse at you." Puzdot took a slow breath. "You wish to mate with me. I'm sorry, but I find that disgusting." The witch made the awful loud noises again before speaking. The orb translated. "No, I'm sorry, that is a mistranslation. That word has a lot of different connotations that your language probably doesn't have. Eat with me, come on. You eat Igwin?" Puzdot stepped onto the ground and neared the water's edge. "I eat Igwin." He looked at the raw fillets. "Do you mind if I make a fire?" The creature made the noises again. "Thank the divine light. I was worried I was going to have to eat this raw with you. No, friend. I got a pocket stove here. Don't worry about making a fire. Poosdot watched the witch pull out a silver item and proceed to spark a flame atop of it. He knelt down, fixated, watching as a weave on the top held a flame without consuming it. He pointed. Can you teach me this weave? Weave? The witch asked. That's a cooking light? I do not understand. The creature touched the whiskers on its face, looking at the flame. Well, there is animal gel in this lower portion. The weave you like sucks the gel up to feed the small flame here. I put this pan on the top to absorb the heat to cook the iguan. Poosdot waved one of his hands toward it, feeling the heat, then touched the pan. What is this material? Is this some sort of stone? The witch moved its head up and down again. Yes, refined stone in a way, yes, special stones remade, special properties. Poosdot pulled his arm back. You steal limbs and heads. All accidental, like I said. I didn't know you creepy arthropods were intelligent. I apologize for all the hurt I've caused your people. Please forgive me, let me make amends. The witch pleaded, its noises mixing with the speech of the orb. Poosdot stared at the thing with all four eyes, thinking for a moment before pointing up at the sky. The ever-light bugs of the night sky. What are they? The witch made the awful noise again before making its gibberish speech. Big fire, just like your daylight just farther away. It looked at Poosdot for a moment, its mouth curving up in a crescent. Your world is near the light of this flame. My world is near the light of one of your everlight bugs. Poosdot pondered its words while looking up at the sky. The lights at night are your daylight? The creature nodded its head again. One of them is. Poosdot looked over at the witch. And all the others? Countless worlds of all types. Most are cold, but many are warm and lively like yours. The witch placed a fillet on the hot pan, causing an instant sizzle. Poosdot sniffed the air, his mouth already prepping to feed. Why have you come here? The witch stared down at the cooking meat for a moment before answering. Banishment, this or imprisonment. Making a new home here, didn't know any thinking creatures lived here. Poosdot watched as the witch pulled the meat off the pan and handed it to him. He took it in his hands and raised it to his mouth, nibbling. He paused after tasting it. What did you do wrong? The witch pulled the other fillet off and nibbled at it, miming his own movements before answering. I was a failure. I could not pay what I owed. I didn't know anything, no skills. I couldn't work any good job. It was less costly on their hoarded wealth and feelings if I was offered a chance to colonize the empty dark. You failed and were cast out. Unproductive. The creature nodded. Correct, you're pretty smart male creepy arthropod. What are you called? Your word, Poosdot asked. I am species title, specific title, the orb replied after listening to the creature. Poosdot darkened his eyes. No, it didn't go through your orb. Say it again. I will learn your true name. The creature replied, and Poosdot listened to its gibberish, miming it. Human. Bubba. Poosdot listened. You are? He paused. A human. Surname Bubba. He said human and Bubba with the creature's words. The human made the loud noises again. Divine damnation. You can speak our language. Bubba paused for a moment, chewing, then pointed at Poosdot. And your name, what are you? I am Poosdot, son of Mother Darkness. Bubba listened, touching a white dot in the hole on the side of his head. Your name is a drop of pus? Really? Like infection juice drip? Poosdot widened his eyes. Yes, it is what Mother thought I smelled like when I hatched. He took another bite, nibbling the iguan fillet. What does Bubba mean? The human took another bite as well. It's a name we give boys where I'm from. It's just a generic local name. You are not special. Bubba shook his head. Nope, just some bum in your swamp. You are not a bum. You are the witch of the South. Bubba Witch of the South. Bubba laughed as he listened to the white dot in his head hole. Bubba Yaga of the South. I like that. Yaga is witch, Poosdot replied. Swamp witch, Bubba corrected. Borrowed from another human culture, but yeah, the translator has to tune itself, but it gets it mostly right. Poosdot looked up at the orb. How does it work? Bubba made the awful noises again. And why do you make that awful sound? It's laughter. Do your people not laugh? Pusdot moved his toothed mandibles quickly, chittering in his mouth. Our laughter. He ate the last bite. You are not a failure, Bubba Yaga. I am a failure. You are magic. Bubba laughed, quieter this time as he took his last bite. Tell my wife that. She hates me with every fiber of her being. You have a wife too? Bubba nodded. Yes, part of my banishment. Had to take a wife and settle here. Do you have children? Pusdot asked. No, she knew many mates before me. We're married, but she will not touch me. She says she is sick of touching males. Bubba shifted on the floating contraption, cutting up another iguan. It is part of her banishment. The rulers of my world did not like her mating work. Mating work? Bubba nodded and put 2 more fillets on the pan. Yes, she mated to make her hoard. He looked up at Pusdot on the bank. What about your wife? Wives. 2. Lucky you, friend. Bad luck. Mother Darkness wanted her hoard to grow, married me twice. Hopefully my sons are keeping them fed. Maybe they will only eat one of the twins. I could not bear Sliplegs being eaten. He is a smart boy like me. Wait, what? Eat them? Pusdot widened his eyes. They get hungry. Divine spirit damnation creepy arthropods? Wow, convergent species development is untranslatable. That did not come through. Explain. Bubba looked up at him. There are small creatures on my world quite similar to yours. Life, it mirrors things across worlds. Success is similar no matter the star. You are different, warm blood, but yet so similar. Many of my species would be terrified that you exist. I terrify you? He laughed again. No, I'm Bubba Yaga. I love all creatures of the swamp. Pusdot looked at the iguan browning in the pan. Did you eat any of my people? Bubba's face changed, eyes widening. Pusdot took that as a yes. The mothers never tell us. How do we taste? Bubba looked down at the pan, speaking quiet. Similar to mud-crawling clawed arthropods with parts of small winged-beaked animals. Pusdot mirrored the human's head nod while widening his eyes. But you share iguan with me? Yes. Like I keep saying, I didn't know before. Nobody knows. Pusdot reached out as Bubba offered a second fillet. How many of your people live on this world? Are there many? Bubba shook his head. No, not many. Few hundred scattered about. There's a town a continent away. And you don't live near them? Bubba looked at him as he ate the fillet and swatted a tiny biting flyer. I find the swamp and bugs better than people. Pusdot looked out at the water. I have found the same, human. Stormsky was the first to smell the aroma coming from the male nest and made her way down the stairs. She entered to find her Pusdot cooking in the middle of the room on a magical flame. She pointed at it, her eyes scanning across the 3 boys and their father. What? What is that? Pusdot looked in the pan at the sizzling shetoff. I thought you liked this meat. No, you idiot. The fire free from the oven, what is that? A gift from Bubba Yaga. Pusdot moved the pan back and forth as he had watched the human do. The wings and legs of meat moved around in the oil. I will feed my females, Sliplegs. Fetch more meat from the bows. Twins, call the women. Sliplegs scurried out the door to pull more shetoff from the cage. Pusdot moved one eye up to his wife. I am no idiot, wife. She straightened herself taller, thinking, and then eyed the magic weave he was using. Apparently not. Mother Darkness summoned her son back to her den and sat waiting. She felt his thrum on her doorstep and beckoned him to come in. He entered and knelt at the bottom of stair. Your wives told me. He looked up with an eye. They are fat, happy. I hear you have another clutch on the way. I do, yes, mother. I hear you have been teaching the other husbands new weaves, she said, watching him. I have. You trade these weaves with the witch beast? Bubba Yaga? Do not correct your mother, boy. He lowered his gaze back to the floor. You trade with it? Yes, mother. Weaves for fresh funga? He widened his eyes up at her. This may seem nice, son, but it will make you lazy. You will forget how to feed your wives. What will happen if this beast decides not to trade with you? You will lose all you have, and worse. Chittered his teeth. I do not see that happening, Mother Darkness. And why is that sun? His wife needs same as mine, but for different things. I learned new weaves, his female puts them on as a thin ornamental shell. An evening of work in my home, and I can feed my home for a week, on Fenga. His wife has gone to the town, shown her new weaves. Many other wives of humans want our weaves. Bubba Yaga shares meat and drink with me. You trust a beast because it shares meat with you, fool. No, Mother, I trust him because he is like me. We both are finding best ways to serve our females. He needs as do I. In that we have a bond. She stared down at him for a moment, thinking, And you will share Fenga with me? He looked up at her with all four eyes widened.